Hi everybody, welcome back to No BS Parenting. My name is Pam. Today's going to be a juicy one. Today we're going to talk about sex. How do you discuss sex with your kids? What's too young? What are the do's and don'ts? The do's and don'ts are pretty gray area for the most part, but there are some basics that I think I'd like to get into today. For my boys' mental health, I'm not going to get into specifics about my discussions with them. They would kill me. I'm not going to go there. But I do want to talk about some of the things that I think that most of us can agree on. When we start talking about sex and our kids start asking us questions about sex, what are the kinds of things that we shouldn't be including in the conversation? I think one of the basics is definitely we shouldn't be talking about our sex lives as parents. That's an absolute no. I think that's a line we don't cross. I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me, but that's one thing I never, ever do, especially with boys. I just, you don't want your kids to see you in that kind of light anyway. I think that they should be remaining separate. That was one absolute golden rule, not breakable, non-negotiable, never answered any questions with regards to my sex life. Other than that, there was very little that I didn't think we could discuss. Now, again, most of us would probably see this differently, would handle it differently. We would use different language. I was probably more straightforward than I think most parents are with regards to sex and discussing it with my boys. I really wanted them to feel like they could talk to me about anything, that if they are curious and they had questions, that they could come to me and I would answer to the best of my ability. Now, I don't think there is an age that's too young to be talking about sex, but I do think that you should use age-appropriate language and detail when you're talking about sex with your kids. You're obviously not going to talk about, the details of, what it is to give head to a 7-year-old, but when you later on, you can, if you choose to, get into a little bit more detail or not, depending again on your comfort level, on how much detail you want to give and that kind of thing. For me, the basic rule was I never answered the question. In other words, I always answered the questions, always. And the language that I used was always age appropriate to what level they were and their understanding. And the other thing that I think that we should be using pet names for body parts, for sexual body parts, a bird instead of a penis, or, like a kitty instead of a vagina. That, you do what you want. I think it's curious that we do that we it gives an insinuation, that the real official term for body parts, we kind of make them dirty. Even now I'm seeing online, they're saying that the Twitter's considering the word vagina to be dirty. Give me a break. It's the body part. It's like saying an arm, a leg, an eyeball, it's a vagina, for Christ's sake. If you're going to start using words like pussy, that's a whole other thing. But, it's a vagina, it's a penis. It's, you can use, these are official terms. I don't understand why everybody makes them out to be, something that's dirty or ugly or vile. They're just literally names for body parts. So I think we need to keep that in mind when we're talking to our kids about sex. And how much detail do you want to get into? Mom, what's oral sex? That question as a parent when your kid asks you what oral sex is, there's a million different ways that you can answer that. I'll give you one example that is fairly generic. You could say, when you do an oral presentation, which part of your body do you use to give an oral presentation? And of course, your child would answer, well, your mouth. Exactly. So as a parent, you would say, well, in oral sex, it's use the same thing for oral sex. You use your mouth. And again, according to age, you can, elaborate or not. But obviously you see that it's not an easy discussion. If your kids are little and you haven't gotten there yet, good luck. You're going to giggle about it later, because 20 years later, it's all going to come back, believe me. And you're going to have conversations around the table, especially with their boyfriends or girlfriends. It's definitely going to come up in the topic. But I think that as parents, we really need to make sure that we make our kids feel comfortable, that they can come and they can talk to us about next to anything. And so I always did. Now, with regards to sex, one of the biggest things I think that for me, because I had boys, was the consent idea. I wanted them to understand, if they're heterosexual and they're interpreting signs that a girl may be giving them, that maybe they will interpret as being consensual. I always say, it's really better to be clear. Get a clear, concise yes, as opposed to, because you don't want to be accused of anything. So that was always a big thing for me when I had boys. And for my boys, it was always that. It was always, the minute you start having sex, the minute you start becoming sexually active, you're opening the door to potentially becoming a parent. And, then I explained to them that the minute a girl gets her period, she can now be a mother. And even if they're 12, that's the line right there. As soon as a girl starts to get her period, she's now ready. Her body is physiologically ready to reproduce. So, there's a huge responsibility that comes along with being sexually active. And I always made sure that my boys understood that connection between the two. So I always made sure that they understood that, condoms, and condoms. They were both heterosexual, my boys, so that was the constant, because for pregnancy, number one, avoiding and making sure that didn't happen, and also STDs. You never know who's carrying what. A girl can tell you she's never slept with anybody, but you never know. I've heard of rainbow parties and all that kind of stuff. Feel free to ask me in the comments below if you're curious as to what that is. But I've heard all these horror stories on the promiscuity that can exist in social circles today. So, my boys, it was always covered up, boy, yeah, ma, okay, covered up. That was always the line that I was always using with them. I could tell when they were being sexually active. I'm really good at reading people. It's kind of a thing for me. And with my boys especially, I could tell. And the minute I saw that they were being sexually active, we would sit down again and we would cover all the bases. Okay, now we discussed this, the consent factor. Okay, great. Yeah, you understand. Good. We also talked about the protecting yourself against any potential STDs and pregnancy. And as you remember, seeing all the hours mommy was working and the fatigue, and then you can picture you want to stop. All those plans, all those visions of your future that you may have, you can kiss it all goodbye if you start making babies before your time. So I was, a huge part of the conversation with them. And what if your kid comes and says that they're gay? Is your kid going to feel comfortable enough to come to you and say that? Your daughter or your son? Hopefully they will be. That was actually a topic of discussion from the very get-go, pre-puberty, that I had with my boys. That if ever they figured out that they were gay, that I didn't want them to feel like that was something they couldn't come, that they should be afraid to tell me. That I was going to be, to me, it made absolutely no difference whatsoever. The only difference it would be was, okay, well, I don't have to worry about pregnancy. That would literally be the only differentiating factor between the two. But that's obviously another topic, that you make sure that your kids are comfortable enough to tell you all that stuff. The one thing that for me was really important as well was the sleeping over. When they're teenagers, and if you have girls, you let their boyfriends sleep over, your boys, you let the girlfriends sleep over. Here in Quebec, I find French Canadian people culture, they're pretty lax with that kind of thing. I have never been lax with that kind of thing. And almost every single one of my friends have told me that I'm way too conservative. You know what? I personally don't give a shit if anybody thinks I'm too conservative. That was my rule. And it was for a couple of reasons. Now, my mom is Mexican, so that side of the culture, there's a traditional don't disrespect your mother's house thing. That was a little bit of it for me. But the biggest thing for me was big picture. Sex comes along with massive responsibilities, because, you can make babies and so on and so forth. And the other thing was sex and intimacy are not necessarily the same thing. And, sleeping next to someone all night, naked, waking up next to somebody in the morning, that is the most profound type of intimacy I think that you can have with another person. And to me, that is something that is one of those wonderful privileges that you can look forward to in adulthood. And I've strongly believed that with my boys. So I didn't want to afford them that privilege as minors, because I wanted them to understand that just because you want it doesn't mean you're going to get it. And when you're an adult, then you are the master of your domain, and you can make all the decisions that you want, to do whatever you want, including this wonderful privilege of intimacy. So it was that big picture. And, I had some pretty heavy discussions with my boys about it because they disagreed with me. So that was a huge part of it, was that whole, it's a privilege, the not everything falls out of the sky in life. You have to actually work and earn stuff. And, that intimacy that you can have with another person is one of those wonderful privileges that you can get later on when you've, earned your way through life, working and, going to school and, buying things for yourself as opposed to your parents buying them for you. Doing all of those normal things that are the evolution from childhood to adulthood. One of those gifts that comes along with adulthood and all that hard work is that privilege of that intimacy. So that was a huge thing for me, and I stood by my rule past the point where they were adults, because I truly strongly believe in it. So if for those of you who haven't had the discussion yet, your kids are too little and you haven't had the sex talk, it's going to be fun. I don't have any advice for you on how much detail to get into, how explicit to be or not. I don't have any advice for you with regards to words you should use, terms, how, your kids ask you about sexual positions, that kind of thing. Do you answer all of them? I think that's really, like I said, that's each individual parent is going to make that decision for themselves. I do think, though, that we have to, as parents, create an environment where our kids feel like they can talk to us about anything. And that includes sex, as awkward as that is. So I appreciate you guys coming back here to my channel. Please subscribe, hit the bell for future buttons, and by all means, give me some comments below if you agree or disagree. I welcome them, I read them all, and hopefully we can have a respectful interaction, a respectful conversation on the topic. Don't forget to kiss those babies. The time flies, the years go by faster than you realize. Thanks again. See you next time.